Well, candidates vying for the leadership of the British Columbia Conservative Party faced off for the final time on Saturday, but some comments made by one candidate in the debate have sparked quite a backlash.
Mr. Milobar, I do not see how on the major issue of our time you will be able to get around the conflict of interest rules.
Just say it. My wife's Indigenous, so you think I'm in conflict of interest? I've never heard of anything so ridiculous in my life. First
She
off,
also works for the Kamloops.
she last shift I think she had was about 9 months ago, and she worked one day as the part-time on-call receptionist.
I'm worried about your
and
family.
accurate.
I'm worried
well,
about
you
your
say I'm in conflict of interest. How is that a conflict of interest? I've been voting against lots of Indigenous issues.
Okay, so this moment has prompted reaction from several federal BC Conservative MPs, all speaking out against those comments by Kerry-Lynne Findlay. All right, the CBC's Katie DeRosa joins me now from Victoria with more on this. Katie, it's always tricky when family gets dragged into a debate. Walk us through what happened here.
Well, as you mentioned, this was the final leaders debate before the party votes on May 30th. And, you know, interestingly, leading up to other debates and throughout this whole leadership campaign, really the candidates have agreed on a lot of issues. So they haven't been that spicy debates. Of course, there's been swipes and jabs, but all five leadership candidates pretty well agree on the big issues that BC should protect private property rights, push back against Indigenous land claims, lower taxes, support for another pipeline. But that's why this personal attack really stood out. Candidates were answering a question about how to entice investors in the natural resource sector when, you know, as you heard, Findlay made these allegations that Milobar is in a conflict of interest. But she kind of beat around the bush a little bit. She didn't exactly say why until Milobar challenged her to say, what you really mean is because my wife is Indigenous, I'm in a conflict, which he called absolutely ridiculous. So when the debate ended, Findlay went to shake Milobar's hand, and he did not. He kind of ignored her and didn't shake her hand. But I'm told from his campaign, no interactions after that. But certainly this is stood out from the entire debate.
No, this is the sort of thing that can make a conversation go sideways. That's for sure. I've seen a lot of reaction to this from MPs and others online. I mean, what's the response been like out there in BC?
Yeah, so the backlash really has been widespread over the weekend. That includes from 4 Conservative MPs, including some of whom served alongside Findlay in Stephen Harper's cabinet. Frank Caputo said, "This is atrocious. Like Peter, I proudly have Indigenous family through marriage. This is morally indefensible." Tamara Cronus questioned whether by Findlay's logic, Ellis Ross, the Conservative MP for Skeena, should not be able to discuss Indigenous property rights because he's Indigenous. Ellis Ross himself weighed in, saying it's a no-win situation for Natives in politics. And finally, Todd Doherty called the comments abhorrent and said, "Are British Columbians to expect that you too are compromised or in a conflict of interest because of your husband's hateful comments in the past?" Now, I'd like to give some context to her husband, Brent Chapman. He's the MLA for Surrey South, and during the 2024 provincial election, some of his past social media comments were unearthed, including one where he called Palestinians little inbred walking, talking time bombs and suggested some mass shootings were fake. So another leadership hopeful, Ian Black, raised that issue when coming to Peter's defense, and here's what he had to say.
We lost the election in 2024, in part due to the racist comments made by our candidate in Surrey South, who happens to be the husband of Kerry-Lynne Findlay. She did not then, and has not since, denounced those comments as reprehensible.
And now Black called Milobar an honorable man and slammed Findlay for suggesting he's not suitable for public office because of his wife. So that's just some of the backlash, but I expect it's going to continue.
Okay, so Kerry-Lynne Findlay had a lot to say in the debate, obviously. Has she responded to any of this, or is she staying silent? Where is she in this one?
I have reached out to her campaign manager, to her communications team, checked Twitter. I haven't seen any comments from her yet, but I'm sure eventually she will be, you know, potentially cornered or asked to address this. But I will say, you know, we're in the last 2 weeks of this leadership campaign where no one really has emerged as a front runner. So any slip, any misstep really could hurt an individual. So we'll have to see how this all plays out, whether this sticks along by May 30th voting day. But again, certainly it's anyone's race right now.
Okay, Katie, thank you so much. That's the CBC's Katie DeRosa in British Columbia, in Victoria. That was pretty personal, when you bring someone's wife into it, obviously. But also, we've seen Todd Doherty, who condemned Kerry-Lynne Findlay there, taking shots at Ms. Elliott, her opponent, by calling Corey tonight a Liberal, saying they brought in a bunch of Liberal consultants to run their campaign who ran against the federal Conservatives. What do you make of what's happening with this?
I make of it that the stakes are very high. We just talked about the Liberals polling ahead while the Conservatives are polling ahead in British Columbia without a leader. And given Premier Eby's popularity or unpopularity, it's very likely that the next leader of the BC Conservatives is going to be Premier. And so I think you see tensions really at a boiling point. I had the opportunity to moderate the Canada Strong and Free debate that happened in BC a number of weeks ago. And a macro observation I would make as somebody with no candidate in the fight or the race is there's a lot of focus on the issues around UNDRIP and sort of internal issues. It seems to me that there's a lot of attempts to out-conservative one another by pointing to the other, saying, well, you donated to the BC Liberals, when I guess almost all of them have, or something like this. And perhaps it's an opportunity to switch gears to talking about what you would do on some of the more fundamental issues around the economy and healthcare and education, because that's where people are feeling the pain. But it's a very competitive race. I'm not necessarily surprised that it's gotten personal, but for the federal party to engage, I think it's best to just stick to your knitting.
Because I don't think that would have happened a year ago or 15 months ago. It's happening now.
Yeah, I mean, there is a real conservative momentum in BC, and I can appreciate that a lot of caucus members feel very strongly about how the race should go and how the next election should go. I just think back to where we were in April of last year. The whole message there was that we should be working to build inroads with other provincial parties, Ontario, Nova Scotia, elsewhere, and it would be unfortunate to see the prospect of that happening in BC ruled out because we've overengaged at this point.
Yeah, I mean, Rob, dragging one person's spouse into it, they're now dragging up. Kerry-Lynne Findlay's husband is a member of caucus, and he had comments where he called Palestinian children ticking time bombs, literally and figuratively, all of that stuff. Now, families getting brought into it now. That's never a good thing for the post-campaign.
I'm reminded of Hugh Siegel, former principal secretary or chief of staff, briefly to Brian Mulroney and to William Davis in Ontario, who channeled Will Rogers when he said, "I am not a member of an organized political party. I am a conservative." Anytime you see Corey tonight being cast as a Liberal, I think that we're not far from blood-hued sunsets and heifers hanging by their eyelids. It's just like a bizarre parallel universe. But I think it is in concert with, and Brad will know this, the wild and woolly nature of British Columbia politics. Because there is the NDP and then there is everyone else. And when that everyone else includes Liberals and Conservatives and Libertarians, it leads to this sort of accusation and this sort of suspicion. I think, unfortunately, it is not allowing for a serious airing of a very serious issue that Canada is going to be facing, and that's land rights as a result of the Cowichan decision that I think eventually will require an intervention by the Prime Minister and the Supreme Court of Canada as well.
It is quite possible. Brad, your quick thoughts, then Vandana, and then we got to say goodbye.
Yeah, what we're watching here are two factions trying to fight out for the leadership of the Conservative Party of BC. You've got your more moderates, represented by Ian Black and Peter Milobar, who's the respondent there, and then you've got the hard right, who were in either the Conservative Party federally or were kind of on the outside of politics when the BC Liberals or BC United occupied the non-NDP vote. And so this is what you're seeing a fight. Why I think it's so toxic and so visceral is because it's the two factions that are fighting over who will ultimately be the alternative to David Eby and the NDP. The tone is just horrible. Kate, you said that whoever wins will automatically or most likely become the next premier of the province of British Columbia. If attitudes like the ones we're seeing in these clips are the ones that are on display, I think that that's going to be a penalty. And that's one of the reasons why Mr. Rustad failed to beat David Eby in the last election, even though many commentators were saying so. So this is a party that's trying to figure out who it is. And that's why I think the fight.
It was by one seat.
It was one person doing that, right? Like Ian Black was very measured when he came in and stuff. You know what I mean? Like, so it's not. It depends on who wins, right?
And I think it's important to keep
100% who wins, because if attitudes like that get on, that they become the ballot question, not whether or not you agree with DRIPA or what David Eby's done under their files. They are making themselves. Oppositions should let governments, defeat themselves. What this opposition is doing is making sure that the NDP has a fighting chance in the next election.
Well, they're providing some oppo research for sure. Look, Vanda, I will give you the last word, but Kate was name checked, so like
no. John, I think it's important to keep in mind how close John Rustad actually came to winning the last election in BC, and that probably tells you a little bit about where the base of the party in BC is. It's not surprising in a nomination race to see the contest be about who is out conservating one another. But I don't think it's the same dynamic as we have in Ontario or as exists elsewhere.
No, probably not. Definitely not, actually. In fact, Vanda, your quick last thoughts on this.
Yeah, I think to touch on what Brad and Kate said, I think the mudslinging doesn't help anyone. I think, you have to focus on the voters themselves. People are very cynical about what politicians and their ability to make impacts in their lives. They should be focusing on the issues at hand, like affordability, education, healthcare. That's what they should be focused on. But I do wonder with the federal MPs weighing in, if perhaps they see opportunity in their future, in the BC future party there.
That's what I wonder about, if any of these MPs are looking at maybe making the jump to run provincially, looking at maybe another long stint in opposition with the majority. Okay, we're going to leave it there. That was fun. We're going to take a quick break, but say goodbye to Vanda Nakata, Brad Levine, Kate Harrison, and Rob Russo.